Okay, so these are the notes to cover New Spain, which is the Spanish Empire in the Americas. You're going to take these notes just like we would in class. I've probably included more information on the slides. That way you can just copy down the slides instead of having to listen to my narration and pick out exactly what's important here. But you'll bring these to class in your spiral or on notebook paper or whatever, and I will check them. And this is just going to be a quick, okay, did you do these? This is part of your preparation and participation. That'll be graded, that'll be going into effect at the end of the semester. Alright, so today's notes, New Spain. And the Spanish are obviously important because Columbus was sailing for them. They had one of the largest empires in the world at one point in time, and they're the first European power to establish an empire in the Americas. Okay, so this is the image that the Spanish wanted to portray to the rest of the world. What are we doing in the Americas? What are we doing in the New World? And you see over here at the bottom right, if you take a look there, you have here come the natives, and they're bringing just on their own initiative. Here are all these gifts that they're giving to the Spanish, who are clearly superior and more civilized because they're dressed and they have their weapons and they have their ships and everything else. Over here on the right, on the left-hand side, you see the guys erecting the cross. Why are they coming? They're coming here to spread religion as well. Okay? If you pay real close attention to the background, if you can see that, instead, what happens is that the Spanish have a completely different experience than what they were trying to portray to the rest of the world. We'll talk about this in a little bit. Okay, so these Spanish explorers who came to the New World were called the Conquistadors. And for the Conquistadors, they had different reasons, different motivations to come to the Americas. You are probably familiar with the idea of the 3 G's. Why did the Conquistadors come? Gold, glory, and God. In that order. Okay? For them, I mean, they all came. They wanted to make it rich. They all wanted to get money. The idea was if they could come over here and conquer, these natives that had, there were rumors of gold and silver and other precious metals and jewels and all of this stuff. So if you could conquer them, if you could get in on that, that's going to be yours. They also came because they were looking for to make a name for themselves and earn some kind of reputation that was going to be that's going to get them some money back in Spain. Get them maybe a title or a land grant or something that they're going to parlay into, again, more money. And then also, because Spain is a Catholic country, they're also interested in spreading Catholicism. Okay, we should have talked about this in class, the idea of the Reformation and there being a competition between Protestants and Catholics to spread the word and convert people. But there's all kinds of other reasons for the Conquistadors to come. And they're not necessarily all, above the board. Some of them needed this opportunity to start over. It's one of the things about life. If you fail at one thing, you can always start over doing something else. Some of them were looking to escape punishment. They may have been murderers or thieves or other outlaws, whatever, and so they're under a potential prison sentence if they're caught, and so they're trying to get out of there. And some of these guys are just downright mean human beings. And they are looking for a place where they can commit some kind of cruelty and get away with it. And you can't really do that in Spain. That's how you end up there with number 2, ending up going to prison. But if you come to the Americas and you do it, you inflict this violence on the natives, not a lot of people are going to care. And they figured that out, and so they started doing it. Okay? So right now we've got a list of some of the Conquistadors and what all they did. It's not going to be just important Conquistadors. There are also going to be some guys who just accomplished some kind of great feat. This first guy right here is a good example. Vasco Núñez Balboa. He didn't conquer anybody, but what he did is still an amazing accomplishment. He crossed Panama Crossing the Isthmus of Panama is just an incredible feat of strength. And I put there in quotation marks, he discovered the Pacific. In fact, he's the one that's going to name it. Another guy, Juan Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon went into Florida. He was looking for the Fountain of Youth. He's probably also looking for gold. And so he explores through Florida looking for that. You probably know Hernan Cortez. Cortez, of course, is the guy, he's going to conquer the Aztecs. He sails from Cuba to Mexico, marches into the Aztec capital, was kind of invited in, and once they figured out what he was there for, they kicked him out. They fought him to kick him out, and then he came back and, of course, conquered the Aztec, and he found gold. Okay? Ponce de Leon didn't find anything. All he found was an ocean. Okay? Next one on here is Ferdinand Magellan. Now, he's not a conquistador like these guys. He's not exploring areas in North America. He's not going to explore a whole lot of land. But what he did is he is credited for circumnavigating the globe, the first European to sail around the world. He did find what is called the Southwest Passage. That's the tip of South America. It's called the Straits of Magellan through there. He sailed from Spain in 1519. He's going to end up in the Philippines. He himself is going to be killed by natives in the Philippines. The rest of his expedition made it back, and so since he had originally led it, they credit him for sailing around the world. This next guy here is Cabeza de Vaca, the head of the cow. That's what that means in Spanish, so I don't know where that came from, but whatever. He was part of a group called the Narvaez expedition. And again, they go into Florida looking for gold, and they got lost. And when they came back to board their boats to get out, the boats that were supposed to be waiting for them had waited and decided that the expedition was lost, and the expedition, everybody had died, and so they sailed on back to Cuba. So Narvaez said, well, I guess we're going to have to make our own way to Mexico, and they're going to try to make it to Mexico City. And if you can grab a map real quick and look at the distance from Florida to Mexico City, it's very difficult. Narvaez, he was lost on the expedition. They tried to build boats to kind of sail along the Gulf Coast. And Cabeza de Vaca, his group, was able to make it. Unfortunately, look at the dates there. 1528 to 1536. They spend 8 years trying to get back before Cabeza de Vaca, and I believe it was 8 people made it back out of a group of about 400 that set off. Next one here is Pizarro. Pizarro is going to take us back to South America. In 1532, he marched into what is now Peru and conquered the Inca. The Inca had a bunch of silver, and so here's another guy that is able to find some money. Next, Hernando de Soto, also in the southeast, into Florida, into the southeast, Alabama, Mississippi area. Kind of like Cabeza de Vaca, he's going to wander around through there. Didn't really get lost. He passes himself off as a healer. He died somewhere around the Mississippi River. The rest of the people on his expedition then, again, had to make their way back to Mexico. And then the last one on here is Francisco Coronado. Coronado, maybe you remember him. He explored the Southwest on up into Kansas. So New Mexico, Colorado, possibly West Texas, and then up into Kansas looking for the City of Gold, Cibola. Okay. So these have been just some of the big names, but there were others, and the reason we don't know them is because what did they do? Nothing of real historical significance, okay? Especially for what we call a survey class, which you guys are in. Okay? So here you see where all they go. There's Ponce de Leon sailing into Florida. Cabeza de Vaca, they got lost somewhere around here in Florida, and he had to make his way, look at that, all the way over here before finally being brought back to Mexico City. Alright, so the Spanish conquest of the Americas, and ultimately the European conquest of the Americas. The Spanish Empire, New Spain, was conquered by roughly around a grand total of 10,000 men. It's not a whole lot. When you look at the size of the Americas, you'd expect larger numbers of people, huge armies over and over having to come in. And it's really not. Right? It's relatively easy for them to conquer the Americas. And there are several reasons for that. One is the fact that Europeans had superior technology. Right? They had better weapons. They had steel weapons. They've got cavalry, and so they can move faster. They're, a soldier on horseback is going to be more efficient and more lethal than a warrior on foot. The Europeans also had guns. Now, the guns in the 1500s aren't necessarily that good. In fact, if I put my army of muskets up against Native Americans with bows and arrows, Native Americans are going to win. A Native American could fire 10 arrows in the time it took a European infantryman to load and fire one round out of a musket. And the muskets aren't even that accurate. Okay? If you hit something, everybody kind of looked at you and said, "How'd you do that?" Okay? They were surprised if you actually hit anything. The purpose of the muskets, and the reason the muskets are a big deal here, is because they made a very loud noise. And occasionally you did hit something. Okay? So they traveled, you could hit something a further distance than an Indian with an arrow could. And that scared the Indians that had never seen anything like this. So it does count as a plus, even though, like I said, the guns aren't necessarily that good. Another reason for the ease of conquest is the fact that the Native Americans just really aren't united. They don't see themselves as Native Americans. They see themselves as Cherokee or Creek or whatever. They see themselves as these different tribes, and they have these historic rivalries with one another. And because of that, Cortez is a great example. When he marched in to defeat the Aztec, he got all these tribes that had been conquered already by the Aztec and basically said, "Look, follow me. I'm going to beat the people that are subjugating you." And each one of these tribes will kind of decide, okay, we'll work with these Europeans. There's not that many of them. We'll beat our enemy, and then we can kill the Europeans and take over. Never worked out that way, but they keep seeing it that way. And that's going to be something you see over and over and over again as the Europeans play the natives off against each other. Another reason for the ease of conquest is the ecological destruction. We've talked about the Columbian Exchange, where the Europeans brought in their own animals, and they also brought in their own plants, and those European plants and animals actually displaced native crops and native animals. And so, when the Europeans bring in pigs, and the pigs run through the maize fields and destroy all the crops, well, now the Indians don't have anything to eat. They don't necessarily want to eat the pigs because they don't know what those are. The Spanish are okay eating the pigs. Oh, what? There's no corn left? Oh, fine, we'll just eat our pigs. We'll go back to eating what we are used to, what we've brought with us. And it was hard for the natives to adjust to. Of course, the biggest reason, though, is disease. The diseases that the Europeans are going to bring in are going to wipe out upwards of 90% of the Native Americans in the New World. And even those that don't die, they're severely weakened by the disease. I mean, the flu won't kill you, but it will put you in the bed, and you're not going to be able to get up for a while. Okay? And then you add to that, smallpox or these other things that actually are extremely lethal. Okay? And the fact that they're lethal is compounded by the fact that the Indians do not have an immunity to those diseases the Europeans had built up. Okay, so as the Spanish start building their empire, they start trying to settle everything, and here we're just going to focus on the United States part. We're not going to focus on anything really south of the Rio Grande. Okay? So the first permanent Spanish settlement in the United States is in St. Augustine, Florida. Most of their settlement, though, okay, so they've got St. Augustine in Florida. They've got a couple other smaller settlements in Florida. Most of their settlement is concentrated in the southwest, and that's going to be New Mexico and California. And they're California over on the coast. There's a mountain range that runs through California. They're going to be west of that, along the coast, where the climate is better. The Southwest really doesn't include Texas. So there were settlements in Texas. San Antonio is the largest by 1,700. If I remember correctly, I think San Antonio had 700 people living in it. So they're really not focusing on Texas. Texas was inhospitable. Alright, so as they spread their empire and as they started interacting with the Native Americans in this area, what was that like? Basically, it is just conflict. The Spanish come in, they're going to take over. Somehow they're going to take over. Usually through armed conflict. And so here on the map, maybe, you can see, here's the orange, the outlines of the current states and whatever, but you see all the different groups, okay? And you see the settlements, okay? Here's the settlement at Santa Fe, New Mexico. There are one or two others through here. There's all the settlements along California, but then in red, you also see the different types of Native Americans, okay? The Apache here in Texas, the Comanche, okay? This out here is under Spanish control according to the map, not necessarily according to whether or not they have people living there. Okay? But anyway, wherever they were, after conquest by the Spanish, the Native Americans are going to be subjected to slavery. Okay? They're going to be subjected to the first slavery in the Americas when slavery does not suit the Indians, because they will die because they're just not used to the burdens that the Spanish place on them. They're also put to work doing things that end up being very hazardous to their health. When that happens, the Spanish are going to turn to African slaves, and they're going to bring some of the first African slaves over to the New World. Okay? Native Americans who did not do what the Spanish wanted or couldn't do what they wanted are going to face severe punishment, very harsh punishments, whippings, beatings. One conquistador, as a punishment for the natives, he had each one of the men had a foot severed as a punishment, kind of on the entire tribe. Then at that point, there's also a huge emphasis on the Indians needing to convert to Catholicism. So these conquistadors, one of the things they would always do is they would always bring a priest with them. Because I may not be able to find gold or glory, but I can at least bring a priest and convert them to Catholicism. And so if you're a Native American and you're not going to convert to Catholicism, you're going to face that harsh punishment. Now all this, the stuff that the Spanish do, is going to create something that became known as the Black Legend. The Black Legend is the idea that the Spanish came in and all they were was cruel and evil and torturous, and they're doing this all for fun. And there are some people that, yeah, they're doing it for fun, and they are being violent and being murderous, and these are terrible, horrible things. But you have to remember, number one, it's not everybody. There are some Spaniards who are coming over here who have good intentions. The other thing about the Black Legend is it is used as an excuse by other European powers to come over here and take over. The English, for example, we must take over land in North America. We must conquer those tribes because we will treat them fairly. If the Spanish get a hold of them, the Spanish are just going to murder them for fun. And that's not necessarily a good motivation. That we're using it, again, as an excuse. Now, there are some tribes who actually were unconquered. They're going to make it. They're going to kind of be on the hinterlands, the borders with the Spanish, and the Spanish will never really be able to conquer them. In 1680 in New Mexico, there's something called Pope's Rebellion, or the Pueblo Revolt. And the Pueblo Indians, they get sick and tired of the Spanish, and they rise up in rebellion and forced the Spanish out of New Mexico. Right? Took the Spanish completely by surprise. The Pueblo take back over their territory The Spanish in the Pueblo lands, they had gone through and destroyed some of the religious buildings and built a church on top of them. The Pueblo go back and destroy the church and rebuild their religious building on top of it. Now the Spanish are eventually going to come back in. They're going to take back over. They're going to beat down the rebellion. But it takes them 20 years before they're able to do that. So this was a fairly successful rebellion, even though in the end the Pueblo did lose. Now on the borderlands, the Spanish would trade with those Native Americans that they had not conquered yet. That may not be willing trade. Sometimes those Native Americans would sneak into Spanish lands and steal things. The most important thing they were looking for were horses. In fact, later on, the Spanish crown is going to make a rule that you could not trade horses with the Native Americans. Well, by that point, it was too late. They already had horses. And the reason that's important is for those tribes that got the horses. They are out there on the Great Plains. Those Native Americans did not have horses prior to contact with the Spanish. And that is going to revolutionize the way they interact with their environment. Okay? You're on the Great Plains, you're nomadic, you're hunting the buffalo, you're chasing the buffalo, you're a hunter-gatherer, and all of a sudden you get the horse. And now you can keep up and outrun what it is you're trying to catch and trying to kill. Okay? In addition, some of these tribes have been, for lack of better terms, picked on by their neighbors. And if all of a sudden you got access to the horse, this for you is a technological revolution. You can now all of a sudden move faster. And these lesser tribes, these maybe third-rate powers, all of a sudden rose to strike back at the people that had been taking advantage of them. Not only the Spanish, but also the people near them. Okay? Two of those groups, the Apache were able to kind of fight the Spanish off and keep them from taking over. They ended up signing a treaty. And then here in Texas, there's a group called the Comanche. The Comanche, when they got the horse, they just took to it. Everybody else kind of had a learning curve that they had to go through. The Comanche were able to figure out how to ride the horse just almost immediately, and they turned into a kind of a bloodthirsty power. They were looking to dominate everybody around them because they had been picked on for so long. And they gained such a fierce reputation that even the Apache, when they were dealing with the Spanish, the Apache basically said to the Spanish, look, we don't like you and we hope bad things happen to you, but over there's a group of people called the Comanche. Don't mess with them. We would not wish them on you. That's how bad they were. They had an awesome reputation. Okay, lastly here, how New Spain was organized both politically and socially. Okay? The structure that they have set up is very, very, very regimented. And it's not just politically. I'm going to run through the political over here on with the text, but if you look here in this picture right here, this was also the social structure of New Spain. Each of these categories was something that it was a box you fit into, and so it was based on your birth. Here we have what do we have? Someone that is the product of a Spaniard and an Indian. They're going to be the mestizos. Okay, and so you go all the way through this. Okay, here's someone called a Chino. A Chino and an Indian. What do you get? You get this person right here. Okay, you get these guys over here. Based on all these different things, who is what? Each one of these determine where you can go socially, economically. It's based on birth, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can marry certain levels above or below your group, but you're never going to be able to rise out of there. And the same is true of the political structure. Okay? With the political structure of New Spain, of course, ultimately in charge is the monarch, king or queen, whoever happens to be ruling at that point. They would appoint a group called the Council of the Indies. The Council of the Indies were kind of the next layer in the governmental bureaucracy. To be on the Council of the Indies, you had to be among a group that are called the Peninsulares. The Peninsulares are people that are born in Spain. They're born on the peninsula. And so if for some reason, even if your parents were Peninsulares and they came over to the New World, you were born over here, you are not a Peninsulare. You can never be on the Council of the Indies. It does not matter how high you rise, there's going to be a ceiling. Underneath the Council of the Indies, there's our definition for Peninsulares. Underneath the Council of the Indies are going to be local governors, and you had a series of local governors. And several of them are going to have the title of alcalde. And so you would have, a governor that was in charge of, say, all of Mexico. Don't forget, back in those times, Mexico included Texas and California. And so you would have the governor of all Mexico, and then you would have a governor of Texas, and then you would have a governor of, say, East Texas. And each one of them would be called, at a certain level, it would be called the alcalde. The problem with this organization, as far as the Spanish would be concerned, is because everything is highly regimented and everyone ultimately follows the rules of the monarch. If I am living in a little town out here in East Texas and I want to change something, if I want to do something, I have to ask permission. And so I have to ask my local alcalde. Well, he doesn't have the authority to give me permission. He's got to ask the next governor up. The governor of, say, East Texas. He doesn't have the authority to answer, so we have to ask the governor of Texas. He doesn't have the authority to answer, so we've got to ask whoever's in charge of Mexico. He doesn't have the authority to answer, so we've got to ask the next authority over here on this side of the New World. They've got to ask the Council of the Indies. The Council of the Indies then has to turn around and ask the monarch, who then has to send the answer. And so doing anything involved so much bureaucracy and took so much time that no one in New Spain really develops a sense of self-government. It's going to be a big difference between the Spanish colonies and the English colonies. Underneath the local governors, in certain places there were encomiendas. Encomiendas were large pieces of land that were given to either former conquistadors who maybe had made a name for themselves, or the crown owed them some kind of loyalty, so they're going to give them this land, or even missionaries and priests. They would give them encomiendas, and the thing with that land is you were responsible for making it productive, but you were also responsible for the Native Americans that lived there. You were responsible for providing for them. Now you are going to turn around and tax them and make them work for you and make you do things, and it goes back to what we saw previously, harsh punishment when they don't do it. And you cannot say that the former conquistadors are worse than the priests, because sometimes the priests will be just as bad. We told you to convert to Catholicism. We told you not to pray to your false gods, and for whatever reason we caught you praying to one of your false gods, and so now we are going to whip you. We are going to beat you because you cannot do that anymore. That is it for New Spain. I hope you were able to get through all that. If for some reason you weren't, you can run back through that. This is on the internet, and this will be up for posterity. So we'll see you in class. Make sure you bring these notes to class so that you can get all your points. Have a good evening.